Yo, what's up, you guys? Welcome back, and we are back for another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. It's your boy Walterdoom. I am back. This is episode 21, and in today's episode, we got a lot to talk about, you guys. We got another franchise talk. What we're going to talk about today is the Friday the 13th franchise that I binge watched. We're going to talk about how good that series is. We also going to analyze the character Dani from Midsommar. We're going to see whether the ending was worth happening or should have been something different. We're also going to have our news of the week, and we're also going to talk about the top 11 mask designs that are really good in horror movies. Alright, so what I want y'all to do is just brace yourselves. I'll be back. I'll take a break. Cue those hand claps for me. Alright. Yeah, let's keep them hand claps going. But actually, let's go ahead and turn them off for a second. I kind of want to start this show off a little bit different, you guys, because an horrific event happened in the past couple of, well, actually not past couple of weeks, but depending on when you guys listen to it, like a couple of weekends ago, there was a mass shooting in El Paso and in Ohio, and I just want to take a moment to kind of take a moment of silence for the victims that lost their lives, or the families of the victims that lost their lives in this horrific moment. I know this is a horror show, and I'm trying to stay away from as much real world events, but I mean, nothing gets more horrific like a horror movie than like a mass shooting. I mean, that's real life horror right there. I mean, we still got the real life horrors in the world that happen, and I'm not really going to be putting too much political stance on anything. You know, I'm not going to sit here and talk about whether I'm for gun control or not for gun control or anything like that, because this show ain't even about that, but more about just horror in general. And to me, I mean, I think this does need to be needs like some kind of attention, and we need to kind of like give a moment and pay respects to those victims and families of those horror events. I mean, hopefully we could find some way to change these kind of situations, find help for people who have mental health issues, because usually, I mean, it's usually people with mental health that we usually find out that are in these kind of predicaments that cause these horrific situations to happen. And because those people don't get the help they need, I mean, they go out and take their aggressions and their frustrations out on innocent people that didn't deserve to get their lives taken in the first place. But with that being said, let's go ahead and take a moment of silence, people. All right. So I know that was kind of an intense moment. I'm trying to make sure that we won't have more moments like this. Like I said, I try and stay away from too much real world experience, because this is not the channel for that, or like the show for stuff like that. But just to kind of pay respects, because it is kind of like an epidemic that's going on in our country, and it's definitely something that really does need to be solved. And like I said, people with mental health issues, I feel like, need the most help as much as possible. I mean, it's kind of hard to kind of detect where the mental health begins, but if anybody, if you know somebody that's dealing with mental health, I mean, just try and help them out as much as possible. But with that being said, and moving forward, welcome to the show, you guys. I mean, we got a lot to talk about. I recently went to Amoeba again to kind of build up my horror collection, you guys. So let's first off talk about what was in my bag. So what was in my bag this time that I managed to pick up the first Purge movie, or should I say the Purge 4, which is the first Purge, basically the prequel. So I managed to find that at Amoeba this time when I went back. I also picked up a couple of other horror movies that were really good. So I picked up The Last Exorcism, which is another found footage movie that I really do like. I watched it on, I believe it was on Amazon Prime, and it was like a really good movie. Part 1 was crazy. Part 2 was even more crazier because of how, I guess, sexualized it got really with like the main character and the devil that was in the movie that was haunting this girl. I picked up The Green Inferno, which is by Eli Roth, and which I thought was like a remake to Cannibal Holocaust, or like kind of like a reimagining of Cannibal Holocaust, but it is just a movie that is kind of loosely based on Cannibal Holocaust. I mean, because they used the same title that was in the movie, which is The Green Inferno. And if you ever watched Cannibal Holocaust, you would know like the film within the film was called The Green Inferno. So that's a movie that I picked up also recently. I also picked up Hellfest, which is another slasher type movie that I really wanted to see. Never got a chance to really see it. So that was in my bag. And the last movie that was really like my all-time diamond in the rough that I just found, even though I didn't find it on Blu-ray, I still have it. And that movie is Psycho, the original Psycho. Yes, I was so happy when I found this movie. And the thing about finding this movie, I mean, I got a chance to watch it. I finally got a chance to get that experience of watching this movie and enjoying every minute of Alfred Hitchcock's crazy ideas of what he wanted to put in this movie. So, if you guys haven't seen Psycho before, I mean, the movie pretty much deals with Norman Bates, which we all know. He pretty much is not really too much prominent in the beginning of this movie, but the other character, Marion Crane, she was very prominent. And the thing that's like iconic about this movie is that the whole shower scene where the character Marion is actually killed. Now, here's the thing. We know a lot about her getting killed in the shower scene. And we all assume, for those that haven't seen it before, because I know I was, is that Norman Bates, who we knew was the killer, we just thought that he was killing random people. I mean, in a way, he still is killing random people. But here's something that I didn't realize when I was actually finally watching this movie, is that this character, as much as they like to bring no depth to the characters, they just talk about like certain shots and scenes, the character Marion, she kind of deserved to be killed.
What are you, fucking nuts?
And here's why. In the movie, you learn about her and this guy named Sam, who is getting a divorce from his wife, who actually ran off with another dude. He's right now done a divorce with his wife, and he's now having a relationship with this new woman named Marion. Now, they make this whole plan about running off together, going to Fairville, which I guess is like, or Fairview, or I forgot the name of it. I think it's Fairview, I believe. But they plan on running off together and having a relationship together, getting married possibly. What happens is that Sam, he goes on his way to, basically live his life and kind of handle his business and what have you. While Marion, who works at a bank, she's making her plans on leaving. So what she plans on doing is leaving her job early just so she could meet up with Sam. Now, here's what happens, and here's why I say she deserves to get killed. So in the bank, they have this investor who comes in. He brings in cash money. Now, mind you, this is like back in like the 60s. So the amount of money that's like in this movie, I mean, they really do value it as high, because the amount that's in this lifetime now, it wasn't even imagined or closely imagined. But anyway, so they get this investor who's investing in a house to buy a house for his daughter who's getting married. The character's name is Tom Cassidy. So in the film, he pretty much is like flowing his money, not flowing, but he's kind of throwing his money everywhere. And he's kind of showing it off like he has $40,000 in cash. Now, in real life, I mean, even though I said it's not much, $40,000 is a lot to see in one place. especially in cash. So Marion Crane, who is supposed to be a trustworthy banker, ends up stealing the money and ends up taking the money for herself to kind of like help her start that new life with her and Sam. So somehow along the way, she's getting paranoid because she does see her boss with Mr. Cassidy on the streets after she pretty much says that she's feeling ill and that she needs to go home. So he sees her later on that day just driving the streets and what have you. And even though she sees him and waves at him, she has an oh shit moment. Like, oh shit, I said I was sick, so I'm supposed to be at home pretending to be sick. That's where she really messed up. So she ends up skipping town, and might I add that their town is in Phoenix. So she's pretty much skipping town, and she's heading out to go see Sam. While skipping out on town, she has a paranoia of someone following her. Basically, like, she feels like her boss or Cassidy is following her, which they don't. She has a paranoia that the police already caught wind of what she was doing, which they don't. But she had enough suspicious behavior for them to kind of figure something is going on. So she eventually finds her way at the Bates Motel, where she finally meets up with Norman. Now, mind you, during all this time, Norman has no clue about who she is, what she's done, or anything like that. But it's enough suspicious behavior to where Norman could kind of figure out something was going on. Now, I'm not going to go into all the other little nuances of it, but basically, long story short, or kind of breaking it down a bit, Marion does give a fake name. Norman remembers the name because obviously he hasn't had any real customers for a very long time because he's basically killing any and everyone as much as he can. And also that he is taking like the role of his mother also, which is his split personality. He remembers the name. He looks at the name that she signs in as after she pretty much told him her real name after they had lunch together, or dinner, I believe. He kind of caught wind that she's kind of like running from something or kind of running away. So he pretty much figured that she was kind of on the run, and he took her more as a fugitive than anything else. To me, I mean, when she died in that scene, I mean, can we really say like she wasn't deserving of that death? I'm just being honest. I'm just really like thinking about it. When I was watching this movie, I just kept thinking to myself, like, as much as they want to make this seem like what a horrific thing that's just happened to this character, in a way, she kind of had it coming. I mean, karma is a bitch sometimes. And this bitch really did bite at that bitch. Because, you know, bitches don't like each other. Oh, man. But it had me also thinking, like, about other characters that, while this character was dying, it had me thinking, like, what other characters in other horror movies deserve to die also? And guess what? I kind of compiled a small list. So here's a couple of characters that deserve to die, even though the movie tried to make us feel some sort of difference about it. Now, it's just a short list. Some characters more deserving than others. So I'm going to have to start with the top dog of them all, Melinda, played by Taraji P. Henson in Acrimony. Now, I know this is not your typical horror movie, you know, but it's enough horrific things that happen in this movie to make it a horror movie, because a lot of disturbing things do happen in this movie. And this movie is definitely based on like obsession, stalking, and just straight up psychotic behavior. And no one plays a psycho better than Taraji P. Henson, man. Now, in this whole movie, I mean, they try and make it seem like Taraji's character, Melinda, she was being taken advantage of her love partner, Robert, who was this engineer who wanted to engineer this battery to kind of help nature Now, a lot of like inventors, they go through tough times, and I feel like nowadays we don't have enough people who create things. Or I mean, there's people that create things. I'm not saying like there's nobody out there. I just feel like maybe because I didn't grow up in the time of like the industrial period, there was people out there like really creating stuff and inventing things, and there was just a lot more people trying to create inventions to kind of help society a bit, to make it a little bit easier. That's what I'm getting at. But we do still have people that like to invent and create. I mean, I feel like there's more people doing more innovations, and kind of like, I guess we have more people, I feel like, innovating what we already have more than like inventing something out of the blue or something that no one has ever thought of. That's what I feel like. I mean, we still have people that are creating stuff out of the blue, and kind of just, it's something that makes our lives easier. But I feel like there's more innovations to stuff that we already have to make things a lot easier for us. But anyway, back to the movie. Yeah, so the character Robert, he's going through this tough time. He pretty much milks Melinda for all her money because he's putting all her money into this battery invention. Now, the family doesn't like him, meaning Melinda's family. They don't like him. They think he's a bum. Well, at least one of the sisters think that he's a bum. And he's pretty much seen as like the black sheep of the family, and that his ideas are going nowhere. I mean, it's pretty typical for people who are short-minded and really don't believe in somebody, and they just automatically think the worst of them. And that's all I kept seeing throughout this movie. The family just kept bad-mouthing him, talking about how terrible he was, while she's busting her ass, doing whatever jobs that she's doing, whatever crappy jobs she's doing, and what have you. So what ends up happening is that Robert gets a big break. So he runs into an ex, but not really an ex, more like an ex-fling per se. And this is actually the same girl that he got caught cheating with from Melinda when they were in college. So it was crazy that this girl that he used to fuck all of a sudden just was giving him an opportunity. So the thing is that he took the opportunity like anyone should, especially if it's from like a top dog company. He took his opportunity of ditching his job, which he got from the family, knowing that he had to be somewhere at a certain time, and if he wasn't there, it was going to ruin the business. But he chose his passion, which I don't blame him for choosing his passion, because that was going to be something worth more than what he was doing now, which was the little family business, which was not even going to get him much money or recognition or notoriety or even like rights to his invention. He didn't have no rights with the company. He wasn't going to make any money once he was falling asleep with that company or anything like that. So he chose his passion, which is good. What ends up happening is that he goes to the meeting. It wasn't good. Didn't really make a deal with them, but ended up leaving instead and going back to the family. They didn't like it. Blah, blah, blah. Cut things short. She left him. Eventually, he got another opportunity from the ex fling. She managed to talk her way to her boards, got him another meeting, and actually got him the deal that he really wanted. And it ended up paying off for him at the end. It really did. So what ended up happening? Oh man, this is where shit gets real. So Melinda finds out that he has finally sold his battery, because he came through, went to her office, told her like everything that's happened, told her that he finally sold his battery. He got money. He paid her back and some, bought the house that they lost, because he ended up losing the house because they couldn't pay for, well, actually they couldn't afford the house. The house was paid for, but they couldn't afford any of their expenses or their bills. So they had to sell the house because they couldn't afford it anymore, or afford anything in it anymore, like as far as like utilities and the bills that they were stacking up. So she ended up having to live with one of her sisters, Melinda. Yeah, he bought the house back, gave her back all the money that she has ever loaned him and some. And some. And not only that, he paid the family back too. It was like the most noble thing that anybody could do that was getting so much bad rep from a family. It was so crazy, man. It was so crazy. Basically, after he got his money, well, after he gave the money to her, I should say, Melinda, she started going crazy, psycho, and tried to weasel her way back to him. As soon as she tried to weasel her way back, she ends up finding out that he gets with the girl who was in that fling. And boy, oh boy, did the trigger start. She started all shit posting, shit talking, just everything in the book that you could think of a better person doing. Everything. You know, she was violating the new fiance's wedding. And that's the crazy part. She had to find out that he was getting married to her too in that moment while she was looking stupid in that trench coat. I mean, seriously. I mean, and let me take a moment and let me backtrack a bit. I mean, and this is me just being a man for a second. I mean, can we all just agree at that moment, if you've seen this movie before, that Taraji P. Henson, for her age, looks really good. I mean, she is almost at Halle Berry level, and Halle Berry is fine. So to say like she's almost at Halle Berry level, that's coming out on a lot of things, you know. That's saying a lot. I mean, I'm still like, man, if I was in that situation, oh man, too many bad thoughts. Oh man, I'm just like, I'm getting what? Nah, girl, yeah, you can come in. Oh wait, her? Oh, nah, don't worry. She's just staying for the night. I mean, we can make this a party. Let's stop. That was so cringe, but yeah, let's just give respects for the fact that Taraji P. Henson still looks good for her age. I'm just saying. But going back to the story, yeah, she's just sitting there looking stupid in a trench coat, and she just now is bitter about like everything that's happened. And the thing that she results to is trying to kill Robert and his wife. And I mean, at the end, can you really feel guilty in that whole gun battle death scene, you know, where she ends up dying because she ends up getting her fucking leg caught on the I believe the boat's anchor, but the chain of the anchor, really. She get caught on the anchor and it drags her ass out into sea. Now, she already killed Robert. I mean, she shot him to death. The wife ends up surviving, and like I said, Melinda, she ends up dying afterwards because she got caught on the sailboat's anchor, and it drags her ass down to the bottom of the sea and all that. So she ends up drowning in the end. Now, to me, I feel like this was a movie about bitter women. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I mean, it definitely comes off as what it is. And to me, you know, as much as they try and I don't know, I mean, I feel like they were trying to put it more as like trying to feel sorry for her just because the guy cheated. The guy cheated one time and he felt sorry about it afterwards, especially if after he realized his chick is crazy as fuck. After he realized how crazy her ass was, he just pretty much like stopped trying to cheat on her and stayed faithful throughout all those years. Yeah, I really couldn't feel sorry for her, especially after he did everything possible to kind of like rectify any bad situation between them. I mean, the motherfucker gave her money back. I don't know how many guys would deal with a situation like that, strike it rich, and then give back to their ex after they pretty much milked them for everything they worth. He's one of a kind. he was definitely one of a kind. Like, she should have been more appreciative of that shit. But it's a movie, though. We need to see a crazy woman trying to kill somebody over some bullshit that she kind of put herself in. But anyway, I couldn't feel guilty about it. I couldn't feel sorry for her death. I was just thinking to myself, like, well, she got what she deserved. Another movie, moving on from that one, another polar opposite of this movie would be Green Inferno. Now, I watched Green Inferno just recently because, of course, like you guys know, I just recently picked it up. So in Green Inferno, it's supposed to be an homage to the Cannibal Holocaust movies. And I was about to say Cannibal Corpse. I don't know if how many of you guys actually caught that. The Cannibal Holocaust movies. And there's this character named Alejandro. Now, Alejandro is supposed to be like this activist in school with all the other characters in this movie. He, like I mentioned, he's a activist, and he is encouraging like this group to go into the Amazon in Peru to protest. Now, the main character, Justine, who is played by Lorenza Izzo, she is very weary about doing this, but she has like this fatal attraction for Alejandro. Here's the thing that I gotta say. So we're kind of skipping around the movie a bit because I have been talking for a bit. Skipping ahead, they're in the Amazon in Peru, and a bunch of the characters that are with them, they are protesting. Protest is kind of a success because they use satellites to stream the protests about what's going on. They go back home, they get arrested, go back home, and their plane crashes into Amazonian area where they are captured by a cannibal tribe. They don't know that this tribe is full of cannibals at first, but they do find out later after one of the characters is killed, and I believe the character is named Jonah, who is played by Aaron Burns. He is the first to get killed because why? He was the fattest one in the group. So, yeah, he was the first to go in the movie. Throughout the film, we do see like other characters getting killed, getting chopped up into pieces, in the most gruesome way possible. I gotta say, in this movie, even though it's based on like the Cannibal Holocaust type movies, this one was not as it was gruesome, but it was not as gruesome as like Cannibal Holocaust. At least that's my feeling. Like, I feel like Cannibal Holocaust, even though it was like not as gory as, and it's weird to say that too, by the way, it's not as gory as Green Inferno, but the violence in Cannibal Holocaust is very surreal because you see a lot of animals getting violated, getting murdered in the worst ways possible. I mean, you see like guts and everything coming out of the animals. And I think that's what made it even more horrific than this movie, is for the simple fact that Cannibal Holocaust had more of a cerebral feeling of gore and violence, and just seeing like all types of like body parts coming out of like animals, and seeing how the natives were being violated and pillaged until they struck back at these people. Whereas the Green Inferno, it was more on the gory side than anything. It didn't really give that surreal or cerebral feeling like Cannibal Holocaust. But moving on, in the middle of their capture, Alejandro, who is the leader of the group, pretty much tells them tells the remaining surviving members of the group that their protest didn't really do anything or changed anything. That the bulldozers that were about to destroy the Amazon, which I feel like I forgot to mention, their operation got delayed by a day or two. So where they are, I mean, they're stuck, but they're stuck until those people who are trying to take over the Amazon and build whatever they're trying to build, you know, they come and, well, not really rescue them, but actually find where they're at, basically. And that's the only way they can get rescue. So moving on to more of like what's happening in the story and why Alejandro decides to die. I mean, by the time the group figures out how to escape, we see Alejandro do a lot of shady things. He says a lot of shady stuff. So in the whole protest, during their protest, I should say, Justine couldn't lock with her chains because, I mean, the lock wasn't connecting right. So the people who were, well, the militia that was protecting the people who are bulldozing the Amazon, they drew a gun towards her, and Alejandro, he pointed his camera phone at the military men, and he said in English and Spanish that the girl he's about to kill on camera, that he could go ahead and kill her, but he's killing a girl whose father works for the UN. That's fucked up situation number one. Number two came in when after they got captured, and he actually told them that what their protest did was pretty much nothing, that everything was still about to get destroyed from these people, and that they were still going to lose like the forest, and the people that are building whatever they're trying to build, they're still going to build that shit anyway, but it's just now delayed by a couple of days. But now what happens is that their movement and group is now more visible than ever. That's fucked up situation number two. Number three is that Alejandro ends up kind of using everybody, and, well, not using everybody, but he kind of ends up throwing everybody into the fire. He does nothing to help anybody. He even uses one of the characters. Well, he doesn't use the character. He darts one of the characters who was trying to escape because he didn't want to be the only one left in the cage. Now, that was fucked up situation number three. So, I mean, to answer the question, did he deserve to die? Hell yeah, he deserved to die. But we end up finding out in the end, he doesn't actually die, which is crazy. Which is so crazy because he ends up being caught on satellite by his sister in the forest, just standing there. So, I mean, to me, it's either he's dead or he found a way to escape. So, I mean, is there going to be a Green Inferno 2? I don't even think so. But, yeah, I mean, those are some of the characters that I thought just deserved to die in a way. Just like Marion in Psycho, I mean, she did like a fucked up situation. And I mean, it's not like she was like Judy from Sleepaway Camp, you know, where she was kind of like picking on Norman or anything like that. But for the simple fact that she did actually still, I get it, she had a lapse of judgment. I mean, who wouldn't have a lapse of judgment with $40,000 in cash in their hand? I know I would. I think I would have that kind of lapse of judgment. Yeah, she deserved her death in every way possible. I mean, I couldn't feel sorry for that death. Just know she died for a good cause, and it gave us a very iconic kill. Oh, man. But what's funny to me, even more than just for that one scene, there are sequels that came after this movie, which I didn't even know there were sequels. Yeah, there were sequels to this movie, and honestly speaking, I'm trying to wonder why. I get it, like the end of the first Psycho kind of was not really ominous, but it did leave more to kind of want afterwards to see what happened to Norman, but who really gives a fuck? Honestly, I didn't really care. I mean, afterwards, I'm just like, all right, well, he did what he did. He has two personalities, you know, plain and simple as that. So, yeah, when I was creating an outline for this show, I mean, what I found out was that there were 3 more cycles after that. There was a TV show also. There was actually 2 TV shows. The one that I've actually watched was The Bates Motel, which is supposed to be like the series before they had the Bates Motel and all that. Basically just how they got it. So it's like Norman as a kid and what have you, blah, blah, this, that, and the other. The TV show, there's supposed to be a TV show, and I forgot what the TV show was about. But, yeah, there's supposed to be a TV show. But in the other Psycho movies, I feel like they don't do anything to kind of like develop the character even more. Because in the second one, it's supposed to be like a 22 years later after Norman is like, I guess, put into a hospital, whatever. He returns to the hotel, finds a new victim, kills that victim. Now we're on to Cycle 3. Cycle 3 is dealing with everything from Cycle 2. They're trying to find a murder victim that, that is now being claimed as missing. And, I mean, yeah, I guess Norman Bates gets killed or whatever, but that's the end of Cycle 3. Cycle 4 is supposed to be a prequel. And yeah, after that, I'm just like, I'm not interested in any of this shit. I mean, maybe Cycle 2 I'll probably be interested in watching, but 3 and 4, not at all. I mean, I'm not too keen on prequel movies too much because sometimes I feel like they don't stay within the continuity of a movie sometimes, and you kind of figure like, well, how does all of this come about, or how does this all come into fruition to this point? But yeah, I'm just not interested at all for these cycle movies that are after this. But we are going to go ahead and segue into another franchise of a killer that we should talk about. So after I take this break, we will talk about Jason and the Friday the 13th franchise.
Red rum. Red rum. Red rum. Red rum. Red rum. Red rum.
Alright, so let's have a little story time or a little backstory right now. So the year is possibly 2013. And your boy Walter just got himself a Netflix account. So what Walter was thinking was, hey, they're advertising The Exorcist on Netflix, so let me go ahead and get this Netflix account for free and let me watch this Exorcist movie. Finally. So your boy finally gets his Netflix account. He gets his account. He sees Exorcist there. He doesn't watch it at that very moment because he tells himself, well, I could watch it a couple of days after or the next day. So I'll save it for the next day because right now I'm reading and I don't want to break my reading right now to watch this movie. So Walter goes ahead and finishes what he's reading. Waits till the next day. The next day comes and he's looking for The Exorcist. It's not there. It's nowhere to be found. What happens is Walter starts raging. Oh man. And he sits there and goes, where the hell is this movie? So Walter ends up not realizing, but realizes maybe for a while when he has this Netflix account, that movies do eventually go away on Netflix. He eventually realized that. So Walter finds the next best thing during that time of having his Netflix account, Friday the 13th. And he realized that he has not seen any other Friday the 13th besides Freddy vs. Jason. So he goes ahead and watches Friday the 13th, and he enjoys every single minute of it. So he watches from Friday the 13th, part 1, part 2, part 3. But there was no part 4. How strange he found that. So after he finds there was no part 4, he still watched part 5 to part 8. But weeks later on, part 4 comes on, and Walter is finally happy because he was able to finally watch the elusive Friday the 13th. Alright, so as much as I like to say I enjoyed watching those movies, I would have to say one thing. Man, was those movies sometimes really horrible. Oh man, as much as I really do like Jason, I'm gonna have to really say, you don't watch Jason just for a story. You really don't. You really have to be in the mood for brutal, hardcore violence. And the thing is that I still see it to this day as like that. But even I see the violence as terrible. I'm sorry, but I really do like Jason. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong on any of that. I don't want anybody flooding my comment section talking about like, well, you don't like Jason, blah blah blah. You're not a fan, blah blah blah. This, that, and the other. But honestly, I mean, if you really look at these films, the deaths are not really that good. They really don't get good till maybe like about part 5 or 6, where they start coming up with different variations. Because I feel like in the earlier films, like in parts 1 to like 4, maybe 5, that he does the same kills over and over again. It's the same kills. It's literally the same kills. Someone gets killed through a bed. Someone gets their eyes popped out. Someone gets beheaded some type of way. There's a few mixtures here and there. Someone gets picked up and thrown into the wall. That's another kill that's kind of like the same from other movies. But it's just all the same. I mean, they weren't really that creative at first. I really feel like they weren't that creative. Another thing that really kind of was bad, like I mentioned before, you don't watch this movie for the story. But even though they do try and create some kind of story for this film, I start to wonder which is better from the Jason series. Is it better with a story or no story? And I feel like it varies on like who you are as a person. Because like me, I mean, I'm really interested in stories. I like the consistent stories. And like I mentioned in the last franchise talk when I was talking about Saw, the one thing that really drew me in was for the simple fact that it had a consistent story most of the time. It played along with like what happened in part 1 and what happened in part 2 affected parts 3, 4, and 5. And parts of 6 also. And it didn't get until Saw 7, like I mentioned last time, that everything just went to total shit. With Friday the 13th, I mean, they tried to play a storyline. They tried to have a prominent character, Tommy Jarvis, as we all know. He was a prominent character from parts 4 through 6, I believe. See, this is where I always get confused. It always fucks with my head because I'm always like, oh my god, what was the series where Tommy Jarvis is in? But yeah, it is from parts 4 through 6 where they have a story for him. So we know in parts 4, that's where Tommy Jarvis is kind of introduced and he actually kills Jason. Part 5 is where he's definitely reimagining Jason or hallucinating about Jason because he's traumatized by him. But at the same time, he ends up becoming Jason at the end, which they kind of left it so open-ended. And it makes me wonder why they didn't play that kind of storyline throughout all the other predecessing Friday the 13th movies, because it seemed like in part 5, that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to make Tommy Jarvis the killer. And it would have made sense. It would have made sense to kind of do that. But it seemed like they wanted to change the storyline a bit. Part 6 is where Tommy Jarvis is actually grown and he's actually out of the hospital. Or actually, he doesn't actually get out of the hospital. He actually, I feel like, escapes the hospital. And he is going to Jason's gravesite to pay Jason a visit and burn his body to shreds. Well, burn his body to the ground, I should say. And what ends up happening is that he brings Jason back to life. Now, me being me, after watching it another time or the third time or whatever time I've watched it, I have to say this is kind of weird and absurd. I mean, because that's the beginning of Indestructible Jason and everything. And then that's when all the Friday the 13th movies turn into what they are. Now, going back to the argument whether it was better with a story or no story, I mean, for me, the stories made it memorable to have the Tommy Jarvis stories because, like I said, I mean, I managed to remember everything from what happened from the fourth one to the sixth one. There's not to say like the ones without a storyline aren't good also, because Friday the 13th Part 3 was definitely a good movie compared to like Friday the 13th Part 1. And I'm going to have to be honest, after watching Friday the 13th Part 1, I'm going to have to say it's terrible. Yeah, I'm sorry for any of you guys out there that really like Friday the 13th Part 1. And here's why I think it's terrible. There's no real story in it at all. And it just seems like we're just being thrown in the motion of things just happening. We all know that Jason's mom is the killer at the end of the movie, but nowhere throughout the movie she plays like this prominent role or like this whole secondary role in the movie. She just seems like a random character that they just brought into the film to say that she's the killer. And honestly speaking, I mean, that was very random to me, you know? So, yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me like, oh, well, what happened in Part 1? Like, what was the story behind that? I would tell you, like, Jason's mom's the killer. That's about it. There's nothing else in this movie that's like really prominent or good about it. The kills are awful because majority of it is like first person perspective and you don't really get to see much of the kills. I mean, especially since that technology back then wasn't that great. Yeah, you don't really get much gore from it. That one was terrible. Part 2 was terrible also because I don't remember much of it. And if I can't remember what happened in your movie, by all means, it was terrible. By all means. Like in Part 2, the only thing that I remember about Part 2 was that it was a hacky sack Jason. You know, he had the hacky sack over his face. And another thing that really was prominent to me that stuck out about Part 2 was Kristen Baker, who played Terry. And that was about it. I mean, my goodness, that was like one woman in the movie that I was just like, man, that's a nice looking woman. So, yeah, I could say like that was probably like one person that I was just like, please don't kill her. But after that, I mean, there's nothing really good about the first Friday. Well, not the first Friday the 13th, but Part 2 of Friday the 13th. And same thing with Jason Takes Manhattan. That was a terrible movie also. Like, the more I looked at it, I was just like, this movie is fucking awful. Why am I watching this? And this could be because, you know, I'm already kind of a little bit more desensitized to like more movies, or like not desensitized, I mean that's probably the wrong word I'm choosing, but I'm into more horror movies than I was back then when I was younger, when I was watching horror movies. And I kind of know a little bit more, and I kind of pay attention to like story, and if I'm like into like the gore and violence, you know. And like I said, I've given passes to movies that were terrible in story. I mean, Playing with Dolls was definitely the worst storyline movie ever. It had the worst acting possible. But what really drove me to watching this movie over and over again was definitely the gore and violence. Just because each time I looked at it, he did, like, the character, the prisoner, Metal Face also, that I like to call him. He took deaths in a whole new elevated way that I have never seen in movies before. I mean, besides him, Art the Clown also were very violent characters. And it was done in a very creative way. But again, I mean, these are newer movies, and comparing them to older movies is almost absurd. Well, that's why we talk about Child's Play and how they compare. And really, where Child's Play kind of get a little bit more practical with their kills, I feel like, you know, that's just territory Jason never really goes into. It never really kind of does the things that Child's Play does to kind of fix up their kills a bit, to kind of make it look more creative. Now, I know Chucky, he comes in the mid 80s and he's more in the 90s than anything. So, of course, like, the deaths and the creativity to create the deaths in the movies are a little bit more advanced than what happened in Friday the 13th, because most of the Friday the 13th movies, besides Jason Takes Manhattan, were created in the 80s. Now, another thing that really kind of grinded my gears in a more hatred way for Friday the 13th, and I wouldn't say hatred, like, I hate the franchise. Like I said before, I love the franchise. I really do. But it's just hard for me to sit there and argue it as a top tier horror movie franchise, basically. I mean, with other movies that kind of do a little bit more, and even like movies that came out the same time around when it came around, like Suspiria. I mean, even though I kind of do have a problem with how much overkill that they do in that movie, they managed to still have an interesting grasp on creating deaths in the movie to where it looked as horrific as much as possible. And same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street, which I am also going to talk about because they just released it on Shudder. You know, Freddy came out in the 80s also, and they managed to find ways to get really creative. And maybe because, like, Nightmare on Elm Street had more of a bigger budget than Friday the 13th did. I don't know. But what really grinded my gears about Friday the 13th, which went into absurdity, and sometimes I feel like it's part 6 where Jason becomes this indestructible killer, but it's part 7. Part 7 was really the worst one out of the two of them. And maybe because, like, in part 7, it felt more like I'm watching an X-Men movie. I mean, whose bright idea was it to create telekinesis for one of the characters? I mean, was that the only way they could really bring Jason back from the sea? I mean, because we see in part 6 that, you know, they did drown Jason in the water. I mean, ironic, that's how he died in the first place, supposedly. But in part 7, he's brought back and he's dragged back. I don't know, to me, it's just too ironic. It's too weird. It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, I don't know who really thought about like having Jason go against this girl who has telekinesis, but that was a very shitty idea. Not to mention that also that this girl who could kind of bring things into life or could drag things with her mind, she was also able to see people's deaths happen as if she was like Dick Halloran in The Shining. I don't know, man. I mean, it just made me think about, like, what does part 7 really want to be as a movie? I didn't get what it was doing. I don't understand its whole purpose of being what it was. But I just thought that part 7, that was really the start of all the absurdities after that. I mean, they don't really start really picking up a really good storyline for Friday the 13th until maybe Freddy versus Jason, I believe. I mean, I haven't seen Jason Goes to Hell, so you guys could fault me on that one if you guys feel like Jason Goes to Hell was a very good film. I had a chance to watch it, but I fucked up and didn't get a chance to really watch it, so yeah. That was like that was definitely my fault on that one. But I mean, with all this being said, I mean, I do wonder, like, will we have a decent Jason movie coming out anytime soon? Now, if you guys haven't realized, there are litigation battles going on with the Friday the 13th franchise, especially with the character Jason himself. I believe the creator of Jason himself, Victor Miller, is going against the company Horror Inc. and Sean Cunningham about who owns the property rights of the character. Maybe like last year, they ruled in favor of Miller, and now Cunningham is trying to appeal that verdict and trying to find ways to kind of get the character back to Horror Inc. So right now, I mean, we're being fled with like a bunch of litigation battles right now for this character, which is very sad because it's like throughout all this time, I mean, we could have had like maybe 1 or 2 Jason movies that were decent, because I feel like the remake of Friday the 13th, or the reboot, I should say, was a very good reboot. I mean, it was very underrated. I feel like that one didn't garner enough attention. It actually had a really good storyline for a story that wasn't supposed to be a story, but it was a very good movie, I felt like. But we are given fan fictions, and I feel like fan fictions might be the way to go. You get me? I feel like the fan fiction movies are definitely holding down Jason in the best light possible, actually. With Never Hike Alone, the Voorhees movies that's coming out, the Jason versus Michael Myers movie was really good, and a host of other movies that are coming out really soon that we should kind of keep a lookout for. The franchise is not literally dead yet. I mean, hopefully it will return soon. Hopefully the battle for Jason is won, and maybe when LeBron James is ready to produce that movie, we get a good Jason movie from his production company. Because if you guys haven't known, I mean, LeBron does own part of the Jason franchise. So we'll see what happens. I mean, hopefully they come in terms. Hopefully in the next 2-3 years, maybe. I mean, I know that sounds like a really long time to wait, but it could be a lot longer, and it could drag out to almost like 5 to 10 years almost, just battling for legal rights of this movie, or of this character, I should say. But yeah, as far as a franchise and pitting it up against like Saw that I talked about last week, now I talked about possibly ranking these franchises. I believe my ranking for this franchise would have to come at a steady third behind Child's Play, which would probably put Saw at the first position. So right now, ranking them, it's going Saw, Child's Play, and then Friday the 13th at third. Now, for you guys out there, I mean, don't get too upset, because there are other franchises out there that are probably way worse than Friday the 13th. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about news. Alright, you guys, so Here's something that no one really asks for. So I'm on Blade Disgusting the other day, right? And I'm looking at this article. It's a news article about buying Chucky dolls, right? You could actually get your own Chucky doll, like owning one. Now, who doesn't want to own a Chucky doll? I know I want to own one. But what I saw was just, who want this thing? So from this company that's called Spirit Halloween, they produced this doll of Chucky based on Child's Play 2. It's a doll that looks terribly nothing like the actual Chucky doll. It got the aesthetics of the doll as far as like the good guy clothes, the red hair, and parts of the face. I mean, I guess this is supposed to be Chucky when he's in good guy form, but the doll looks horrible. Now, do y'all remember the one scene in Child's Play where they said he only has a face that a mother could love? And after that, he proceeded by saying, "Fuck you" to the old lady. Or actually not. She actually didn't say he had a face that only a mother could love. Actually, I'm thinking of another Chucky movie. Actually, she said, "That's a horrible looking doll." And he said, "Fuck you" to her. But with this doll, this is definitely not even a mother could love. It's just absolutely terrible. It's terrifying in every way possible. The eyes is weird. The doll has no eyebrows. And I know Chucky doesn't really have eyebrows or anything like that, but the doll has no type of eyebrows at all. It's so weird. The size, I mean, I don't know if he's the correct size, but I believe he's not even the correct size. Maybe full of stuffing. I mean, this doll is just everything no one asked for. And I was on Twitter too when I saw this. And the way they were talking about it on Twitter, I mean, Blade Disgusting was trying to like really hype up this doll. And I hate the fact that they're really trying to hype up shit. They really are hyping up shit. If you guys remember, I made a list of like movies that were good from this year that came out this year. If anybody noticed, I didn't even include The Perfection in that list, which was one of the movies I really wanted to watch because it had all these change of twist and everything. Now, after watching The Perfection, watching it once was good enough, honestly speaking. If you watch this movie a second time around, unless you're trying to watch it for Logan Browning or I forget the girl's name that was in Get Out, but if you're just watching for those two girls, that's the only reason why you're watching this movie, because I know I was. Nah, actually, real talk, I was really trying to watch to see if I really liked this movie or not. And watching it a second time around, I just realized how terrible this movie really is. Like, once when you get past the plot twist in the movie, it's really nothing exciting about this film at all. Except for, like, the story behind abuse. And that's about it. That's about it. It's a story about abuse. And nothing more to it. Does it make an exciting film? Not really. Does it make it a meaningful film? Possibly, but I mean, that's whoever's side you're taking it. But as far as this doll is concerned, it's a terrible doll. I would not spend a dime on this horrible looking thing. Apparently this doll costs like about $90. Whereas probably like a real replica of Chucky, you could probably get it for like $100 and more or more. I mean, you have to really probably break the bank on getting like a life-size replica of Chucky if you wanted one. But this doll, and people complain about the new Chucky and how Mark Hamill's Chucky was horrible looking. No, imagine if this was the Chucky doll in the new Child's Play movie. This doll would be terrifying. It would be horrendous. It would be very horrendous to see this doll. But moving on from something we didn't ask for to something that we didn't think we should ask for, but it actually was given to us, and it is terrific in every way possible. So we all know that the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie just came out. Well, there's this artist named Vile Consumption, and what they do is that they recreate all the nightmares, well, not all the nightmares, but all the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book covers and make them into prints using iconic horror legends. Like he has a Freddy one that has Scary Stories to Tell on Elm Street. He has a Jason one with Scary Stories to Tell on Crystal Lake, and an Alien one that's called Scary Stories to Tell on LV 426. This is something that we really didn't think we should ask for, or didn't think that we needed, but we didn't ask for. And these are some really good prints, especially the Jason one. They kind of make him kind of like fade into Crystal Lake a bit. It looks almost like a very good movie cover in a way, or book cover, I should say. If they were to decide to make any of the Scary Stories based on any of the horror icons. I mean, that was one good one. Another good one was the Freddy Krueger one, where you see Freddy's kind of like this whole big demonizing character, and he's kind of like, he looks like he's zeroing in on his next nightmare victim to kind of scare him. I mean, they make him a very big dominating figure in this drawing, and the character that he's trying to terrorize very small and insignificant. But it's definitely some prints that you could get in his store on Storm V. I'm struggling saying like the name of it, but the prints cost about $10, which is good. $10 each, I should say. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind having that in my collection. And moving on to something that we were waiting to hear. So a couple of movies have release dates. Bliss, which is the movie starring Dora Madison, who is an artist who finally gets her inspiration from taking drugs, but also becoming a vampire. And that movie is being released in limited theaters on September 27th, so I can't wait till that comes out. Which means possibly that this movie is gonna make it to like Netflix, Shudder, or whatever in like December, or possibly sometime in 2020. Who knows? I mean, that's a movie that we all been kind of waiting for. I know I have. And the Are You Afraid of the Dark TV series is coming back. Now, I saw the trailer of it, and might I say, I mean, for a kid show, this show actually looks very terrifying for kids. I mean, they got monsters pumping out. They got vampires that are very sinister looking. I mean, it looks very shot well. Like, it's really shot well with the trailer. I know there was supposed to be a Are You Afraid of the Dark movie, but they put that on hold. But they are focusing more on the TV show, which is good. I mean, it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid, when I used to watch that show all the time. So I'm glad they're kind of like bringing it back a little bit, and they're revamping it a bit and kind of making it a lot better than what it used to be from back in the days. I wish that they would kind of like bring back the old school version of it. Maybe like bring back a couple of episodes on like Netflix or something like that. That would be dope to see. I wouldn't mind watching that. But other than that, I mean, that's the news for the week. I know I was kind of quick on the news, but I didn't want to spend too much time because we are moving into our next segment of the show. Next seg. I swear, sometimes I hate the way like I say things. Oh man, but that's coming from being tongue tied. Well, not really tongue tied, but just like getting a little tired with the voice. But yeah, we're gonna move on to the next segment of the show, and we are going to talk about Midsommar again. I know everybody's like, that movie was so terrible. I don't get why so many people hate that movie. I mean, everybody that I talk to about Midsommar, I mean, I just hear negative reviews about it. And in my opinion, I really don't think that harshly about it. I mean, the only thing, like, once again, I gotta say is that I hate the way the character Christian just went out at the end. But we're gonna actually analyze that situation and see whether he deserved his death or not. So, as they say in Scream that you shouldn't say, I'll be right back.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Alright, so you guys know last time I talked about everyone's favorite movie, Midsommar. We need a rim shot on that one. But yeah, last week I talked about everybody's favorite movie, Midsommar, and I gave my opinion about the movie. I mean, it's definitely a movie whether you like it or hate it. But the one thing I gotta say that I wanted to focus on most was definitely the ending. I did not like the ending at all. So for those that haven't seen it, and of course you guys should know spoilers are intended in this show, but I didn't like the ending to Midsommar, you know, knowing that Dani killed Christian as a sacrifice in the film. We all go through that whole journey with them. I mean, we know that their relationship is rocky and that Christian, he wanted out the most. But he managed to stay with her just to keep the relationship together. I mean, because he felt low-key obligated. I mean, I get that. But at the same time, I mean, who's to say that he didn't really feel any type of real love for her? You get me? Like, who's to not say that he didn't really wanted to leave that relationship completely? I mean, maybe there was something that he knew that he couldn't find in anyone else, which is why he stayed in it. But being that, I mean, he had to deal with all the mental, psychological abuse that Dani was taking from the relationship. I mean, it's not that she was trying to manipulate him, but it was just more of that she actually needed more time to be by herself. And that was the thing I was trying to get at, is like, she needed time to be alone. She needed to be by herself to get herself together, to kind of fix herself instead of being up in arms with someone else. But we see in the film that the character Pele, who was their friend, he was plotting and planning the whole time. So I wanted to put an argument together about why Christian didn't deserve to die, because obviously everything was plotted towards their demise from Pele. I mean, he was the one that was like the mastermind. He's the one that brought all his friends there. His brother brought all his friends there too, just so they could be sacrificed in the name of that cult that they represent. So, to talk about like the whole event, or the whole reason why I feel like Christian didn't deserve to die, here's a couple of reasons why. I mean, number one, he was a cultural anthropologist, for one. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys felt like that character deserved to die. I felt like he didn't deserve to die at all. But as a cultural anthropology major, and this is something I had to look up myself, that what he does is just pretty much observe and kind of take notes. He doesn't do anything to kind of like change a situation. He doesn't do anything to kind of like fix like whatever he thinks, in quotation marks, is culturally wrong with whatever they're doing. The main point of him being a cultural anthropologist is just to observe and report. So I'm pretty sure some people, and I feel like the movie kind of steers you in that direction of looking at Christian more as a cold-hearted person, like as if he didn't care about any of the craziness that was going on. Like, for one, well, let's take it to when the old people who have reached their life cycle, they ended up committing suicide by jumping off a cliff. In the culture of the culture that Pele represents, or pretty much the cult that he represents, they have a cycle with how life is supposed to run. So you have your life cycle as a kid, then you have your cycle as an adult, and pretty much like you don't really be a full adult until like 35, I believe, because during that whole solstice event, they were sharing rooms with like a whole family, so everybody was sharing a room together. And according to Pele, if I can remember, he said like you don't really move until you're like 35 years old, which is very interesting, by the way, because out here, you know, we make such a big deal about, you know, being on your own by the time you hit 18. You know, it's like no one really cares about like, you know, what you do after that. But for them, it was like, even though you're 18, you're still seen as a child. You're still learning, because now you're not learning about youth. You're now learning about the world, which makes sense in a way if you think about it. I don't know. Sometimes you kind of feel like some people's cultural views are a little bit more, I guess, mature, or it makes more sense than sometimes American views, because I feel like sometimes American views could be kind of skewed sometimes. But it's also about like where you grow up and who you're learning from, and, you know, your family and all that. But in the movie, yeah, you get like 3 cycles of life, and your 4th cycle is the whole death cycle, where like you reach a certain age where you're old and elderly, and according to Pele's culture, your life cycle pretty much ends like when it comes to an end, and that's up to the seniors themselves to figure out when their life cycle ends. And I guess at a certain age, it also depends on that too. And I believe it was like 85. So their reasoning for like the elderly people to commit suicide is more based on like they're elderly, and, you know, it kind of makes sense more than like actually dying in your sleep. They kind of represent like dying in your sleep to the willingness of dying as the same thing. And they view it as like not really 2 different things at all. So instead of like living out your life old, elderly, hurting and everything, you just pretty much call it quits, and, you know, you have a big ceremony with everyone around the village, and after you have that ceremony, you just pretty much go to the cliff and just like finish your life cycle. So I'm pretty sure in the movie, I mean, and this is my opinion on how I view it a bit, is like how they kind of steer your emotions a bit. But I feel like in the movie they do kind of like steer you in the direction of agreeing with Dani a lot, and maybe just like seeing things the way she sees it in a way. But I couldn't really see it in her way, because, you know, I know what an anthro major is. I didn't know what kind of anthro major he was, but I knew he was an anthropology major. So in a way, he was thinking was more of how an anthropologist would think. So to see things as like horrific as he was seeing with the culture as in that situation, he couldn't really do anything or think anything, because he has to be unbiased about everything that's happening. He can't put his own cultural biases into what he thought about those people. And that's another thing about Dani, is that I felt like with her, because she was so emotional, and that, you know, she had a certain type of mentality, is that she was kind of pushing her own values and thoughts towards like the situation. But Christian, he was more like, yo, I'm trying to study and how these people think. Like, I'm trying to understand why they do the things that they do, instead of just condemning them right away. And it's funny because, like, dealing with, like, different differences of culture, I mean, you just have to see it as, like, you have to be unbiased. I mean, because it's like, what happened to A$AP Rocky? I mean, he got arrested in Sweden for fighting with a tourist. Well, not really a tourist, but someone who lives out there. And yeah, he may have fought the guy for all the right reasons, but again, you're a tourist. Like, you need to not put yourself in a situation where, like, certain things could kind of like put you at a disadvantage because you don't really know the laws out there like that. And that's the thing. And that was kind of like that. Because even in the movie, I mean, you see Josh, he gets killed because he was taking pictures of the scriptures from their village after he was told strictly not to do that. But he pretty much snuck out of bed and went to their little chapel and started taking pictures just for a thesis paper. And what happened to him was that he was condemned to death. And same thing with the character Mark also, who in the movie pissed on one of the ancestral trees from the village. And his punishment for that was straight up death also. So it just goes back to like thinking about laws and things that shouldn't be violated. I mean, you just can't go into other people's cultures and put your own viewpoint thinking things are the same, but it's not really the same. But it kind of reminded me of also like with Cannibal Holocaust. I know it's funny to bring that back into the picture, but it actually is very relevant to that. And it reminds me of when they were watching the Green Inferno video in that movie where the characters who were actually captured, what they were doing at first was definitely uncalled for. I mean, they went and pillaged through the jungle. They were killing animals. They were raping women. And they pretty much destroyed a whole village and burned it down. Now, is it the natives' fault for them wanting to seek revenge afterwards? No, it's not. I mean, it was basically in their nature. Because why? Because it's part of their culture and customs. So, to me, I mean, it's the same thing in Midsommar with, like, the elderly couple who committed genocide because they were at the end of their life cycle. Now, does it seem right that that happened? No, it doesn't seem right. But with the culture itself, I mean, you just don't know. I mean, the culture itself actually seemed more like it took everybody as a joke, especially people from the outside, because you do see like them mocking everyone in a very ridiculous manner. I mean, they mocked Dani when she caught Christian having sex with Maja, Pele's sister, in the little sex room or whatever. That room was supposed to be, I guess it's supposed to be like a breeding room. You get to see the people mock the elderly man who only broke his leg from jumping off the cliff, and everybody was just kind of mocking him before he just literally took a hammer to his face. That shit was so fucked up. But it was definitely a culture that just like, you really just don't know what their customs are, and to kind of condemn them already for how they are and what they do it was ridiculous for her. And I know for her it was just like too much to deal with, especially after seeing Christian kind of have sex with the other chick. The second argument of why I think he didn't deserve to die is definitely the part about romantic relationship, about him wanting to stay with Dani. I mean, I feel like by the time it got to close to the end before he had sex with Maja, he was actually coming to the realization of everything that was going on. And pretty much after kind of getting all the research that he wanted from the culture, he started believing more that this that things just wasn't right with this culture, and he wanted out. Now, clearly, I mean, as the movie kind of panders, they kind of pander in a way that he didn't want to be with her anymore. At first, he didn't, but he did eventually manage to stay with her, stuck it out, stuck it through the tough times, because that's what all relationships are. Tough times, hard times, good times, easy times. I mean, you just got to stick through all of it if it's the real thing. But I just felt like with Dani, she was listening to more of outside sources and people that just literally just wanted to see them break up. And that's the same thing with Christian also. And that's like with anybody's relationship too. Like, you kind of get those friends who are always on the outside and they always trying to pander in a way of saying like, well, just break up with that person. But at the end of the day, I mean, those people don't really know what fully is going on in a relationship. I mean, unless somebody is like beating on another person, that's where you just gotta like not really put your input to anything, because at the end of the day, it's none of your business. But yeah, and back to what I was saying, as far as like the relationship goes, that he still wanted to be in it. I mean, obviously he was trying to make efforts to making her comfortable. I mean, especially when they were first trying to do like shrooms and all that. She didn't want to do it at first, and he didn't want to do it also, because he was just like, you know what? I'm going to stick it out, wait it out with you, and whenever you're ready, you're ready. That was my first signal of him actually trying to keep the relationship together, and that he was actually trying. The second try was when he actually gave her her birthday cake. And actually, I should say, really, it's like the third try, because the second try is him actually coming clean about the trip. Even though he didn't bring it up, he came clean about the trip and actually invited her to go. He didn't have to invite her. He could have just kept it to himself and just been like, well, you know what? I'm going. But he invited her anyway, and she went. But back to what I was saying, the third thing would be the birthday cake. Even though Pele, who was a very sneaky character, I might have to add, and I just still feel like the whole thing with Pele, his character was to try to acclimate her into their culture and make her his queen. I mean, it was clear, like, from the get-go, when he started doing more like hitting on her, and we were learning more about what the culture was about and what things or customs that they actually do in their culture. But it just seemed like he was trying to distract Dani, or trying to pull Dani as much away from Christian as much as possible. You know, he gave her a birthday present before Christian did, even though he gave her a birthday cake. Not Christian, but Pele, he gave Dani a drawing of her. And to be honest, man, I mean, that was creepy within itself. I mean, can you imagine one of your friends kind of like going to your boyfriend or girlfriend and they're straight up giving them like a present behind your back? I mean, that just doesn't seem right. But she accepted it, and she was getting sucked in, where Christian, he later comes up to her and actually surprises her like, hey, I have a birthday cake for you. Don't think I didn't remember. Because he wasn't trying to forget, and he actually gave her a cake, which is, to me, I mean, I feel like the cake was more personal than the picture, but I mean, that's up for you guys to debate on. But yeah, that was definitely the second thing that kind of showed Christian wanted to still be with her. And even after like Dani won the whole Queen event, Christian was trying to get her out of there with him. And he realized what he wanted and what he didn't want to miss out on, and that was her. But because he got drugged, he ended up with Pele's sister, which is my third argument. How Maja, Pele's sister, was really like just a pawn in Pele's scheme. And honestly, I don't think Christian was trying to necessarily get with her at first, but it was more on the fact that Pele kind of set everything up. And I feel like that's what happened. He set everything up from the get-go, because that was the plan all along, was to make him king of the village and make her queen of the village also. And that was pretty much it. I mean, because Christian didn't even notice her at first. He didn't notice the sister at first. He didn't notice Maja at all until like she kicked him and tapped him a bit. Then he didn't know that she was trying to get with him until Pele told her like she had feelings for him, or that she was kind of eyeing him. And he was kind of putting the thoughts in his head. But by then, I mean, Christian is already drugged up and everything. So he's not thinking straight because he's drugged up. And he's drugged up continuously. And not just him, but everybody that's with them. I mean, they're pretty much drugged up all day long by these people. And honestly, I mean, even though he ends up having sex with her, it was more in a reluctant fashion. And it was even more fucked up for the fact that he was drugged and coerced into this action. I mean, not to mention that she put pubes in his food, which is also a source of witchcraft or love spell, whatever you want to call it. He was really taken advantage of, and it was like just a really fucked up situation. I mean, by the time he realized what was going on, he was just too numbed, too drugged, and couldn't even figure out what to do. And it was messed up at the end because all Dani saw was just him having sex with her. And that's all she saw. She didn't have no reasoning behind it. She didn't have any, like, clue about what was going on Christian's side. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, he did that. But at the same time, I'm just like, he didn't deserve that. He really didn't deserve that at all. And just for him to be drugged up and just to have sex with that girl, I mean, it was a fucked up situation. And I really thought it was more fucked up that Dani just chose him without ever hearing the side of his story and just burned his body as a sacrifice. And honestly speaking, I mean, I guess she kind of belongs there with these fucked up people because she's just as messed up as they are. But honestly, like I said, I mean, the movie is good, but that part of the ending was really bad for me. I mean, I just did not like how it ended at all. I was very dissatisfied with the character Dani, but at the same time, I really was just dissatisfied with her majority of the film. And honestly, I mean, I know I spoke about this once, but she did remind me of someone that I used to kind of date back in the day and all that. But just not only that, but in the movie itself, I mean, she was just too overly emotional about everything and just too judgmental. And it was just like she could not decide what she wanted to do with herself. And hence why I said, like, she seemed like she was somebody who didn't really love herself that much at all, or just even figured out what she wanted to do with herself that much, and that she needed to spend more time with herself by herself than be in the relationship that she was in, thinking that it was going to be the one thing that was going to save her or cure her from her sadness. And it's honestly like, nah, a relationship doesn't do that. A relationship could kind of help guide you, but at the end of the day, you have to help guide yourself. But that was just my thoughts about Midsommar. I mean, that's my little analysis about that. I mean, if you guys got anything to say about it, go ahead and put it in the comment section. But my thoughts about Dani, I just was like, this has got to be the most fucked up character I have ever seen in a movie. I mean, that's just my thought about it. But anyway, we're about to go ahead and take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the top mask rankings in a horror movie. All right, be right back.
Here's Johnny.
Alright, you guys, so since we were talking about Jason today, I wanted to rank like my top 11 masks in a horror movie. Now, the way I'm doing these rankings is mainly by design and just how nice the designs of the mask are, and some type of like terrifying, maybe some type of emotion that they kind of inflict as far as terror. So here are my top 11 masks. Starting from number 11 with the Guy Fawkes mask. So the Guy Fawkes mask in Knife Plus Heart, it's not really much of like a crazy design. I mean, it's more of like if you guys ever watch wrestling, it's like Mankind's mask a little bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they got the idea from. Yeah, it's a mask where like it's just pretty much strapped around his face. And he wears like this fake curly hair to kind of like mask his identity, because when his identity is finally revealed, we see that he's like disfigured and bald, and he's almost like horrifically looking like Freddy Krueger in a way. But yeah, that's at number 11. Number 10 is the pig head mask in Saw. And my goodness, I mean, nothing gets more memorable than the pig head. I mean, just by the way it was designed, and basically by the idea that they gave it through like, I guess, a Chinese New Year, which I just found very far-fetched of why they're trying to create a backstory for the pig head design. But I mean, it's definitely a design that has been very prominent in the Saw series. I mean, ever since from like the first Saw, the pig head mask definitely was a terrifying mask to see every time it was popped up, and it's a very cool little design that what they gave it also. I mean, it's very sleek and it's very creepy looking. Number 9, we have the polite stranger mask in the Purge movies. Now, this one's at number 9, mainly for its design that it's just not really a really creepy mask or anything like that. I mean, it looks like just one of those masks that you'll buy as a child, kind of like for like Halloween, you know, when you don't have like a real costume or anything. You buy one of those like storm masks in like CVS or like Rite Aid or some shit like that, and you just use that as like a mask for Halloween. I really thought like those masks, even though they kind of designed it in a very creepy fashion, those designs for those masks was pretty cool and awesome. I thought it was really awesome that they use it in the Purge movies. They stay memorable to me to this day, ever since I seen the commercial for the Purge. But yeah, that one had to come in number 9. Number 8, I know a lot of people are probably going to hate me for it, but the William Shatner mask in Halloween definitely comes at number 8. And it's not because it's just a bad design mask. I mean, I'm going based off more of like the designs more than it being iconic. But, you know, for me, I just feel like the William Shatner mask is a cool design. I like the idea that they just took like that mask that they just found out of nowhere and just used it as like the mask for Michael Myers. Now, honestly speaking, I mean, could the mask be some other type of mask? Probably so. I mean, the William Shatner mask doesn't seem like it really has a real mainstay for the character itself, but it definitely has been the prominent thing used for Michael Myers over the years. And over the years, they kind of like aged the mask a bit, which is very cool. I mean, it goes from like this really white mask, very sleek looking in the 80s, to now this very gritty looking mask now in the 2010s. So that had to come in number 8. Number 7, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, number 7, who comes over Michael Myers? But number 7 would be the Stranger Mask. And the reason why I put them at number 7, I mean, they're nice designs, you know, they're pretty creepy. I mean, the baby mask is definitely creepy. The mama mask is definitely creepy. The hacky sack mask from the male killer, because we all know they don't really have any names or anything like that, would have to be the most, I guess, meh mask ever. I mean, they do evoke some sort of like terror if you see that mask. I mean, but as far as designs, I mean, the if it was just the baby mask by itself, maybe it would be a little bit higher, but I don't know. For like the Stranger, I mean, it's definitely memorable in ways than one. But moving on to number 6 will probably be the one that really starts like becoming more memorable to me, is definitely Metalface from the Playing with Dolls series. And he's also called The Prisoner. So if you guys ever watch Playing with Dolls, this mask is definitely crazy. And the designs of this one is so crazy. It was like, whoa. You guys will be amazed. And I mean, and this is probably why it's number 6 in my book, because just because it's like a metal mask and it has like all these barbed wires that makes it look very crazy looking. I mean, I'm wondering how the person who designed the mask even come up with this idea for the mask at all, for Metalface. And I just feel like it kind of reminded me more of like MF Doom in a way sometimes, but not really too much, because, you know, I know MF Doom goes by Metalface also. But definitely this mask is definitely a crazy design. Number 5 is the disfigure faced on Toolbox Murders 2. And the reason why this one takes number 5 is that this design is so crazy with the face. It's just insane. I mean, you would argue that possibly if you've seen this movie that his mask is not really a mask. Well, I would beg to differ, because if you guys ever read the contemporary Joker comic books for Batman, you would know that Joker literally cut off his own face and used his own face as a mask over his cut up face in a way. And this is the same type of face and mask that the killer has in this movie. And it's just like seeing the design of his face and just seeing like the teeth coming out of it, and you see like bits of the skin and also nails in the face and all that, makes it very horrifying mask to see. I mean, I wouldn't blame people for having nightmares if they ever saw that face, because that face is very terrifying. Alright, number 4. Number 4 gotta be Jason. And here's why Jason comes at number 4. The hockey mask, man. The hockey mask is definitely iconic in every way. I know I'm not rating it on icons and all that, so please don't kill me in the comment section. But the hockey mask is definitely prominent every time you see this motherfucker come up. As soon as you see this dude come up, the first thing you just gotta think of is Jason is coming to kill me. And honestly, I mean, again, we could use the same argument about Michael Myers, you know, with the William Shatner mask, but honestly, Jason has had other masks before, and it did not evoke the same kind of terror or fear. I mean, he did not evoke any terror or fear when he had the hacky sack mask, and we saw an improvised version or a reimagining version of the hockey mask in Jason X. And honestly speaking, I mean, it did not play as much of a prominent fear as the original hockey mask does. So yeah, I mean, at number 4, I gotta give it to Jason. I mean, it's simple. The design is definitely simple, and it's definitely fear ranging whenever he's in a scene. Number 3 will have to be the animal mask in You're Next. And the reason why I have to give it to them, I mean, not just because of them being vicious killers in the movie, but just how nice those masks really are. I mean, they are really designed good. They really are just like really greatly designed masks. That is definitely will stick in your mind each time you think of that movie. And there's no other way I could really describe it else. Number 2 would be Ghostface. Now, see, here's the thing. Between number 2 and number 1, Ghostface at first was my number 1. Just because of how I like how that mask is designed, and it's definitely memorable, and it definitely does evoke the whole fear of like the killer and all that. And just for the simple fact, like, if you see this mask around anywhere, I mean, you're definitely going to like remember Scream at the most. But I had to move it down to number 2 because number 1 is just really like, what the fuck? The design is crazy with this one. But yeah, just because the Ghostface mask, it's definitely a simple mask, you know. It's just a ghost with the howling face and all that, and it's just always been like one of my favorite masks whenever I've seen it in the Scream movies or just any horror movie period, especially when it was like being made fun of in scary movies. But number 1 goes to Leatherface. Leatherface's mask is definitely got to be the most craziest mask of them all. I mean, who else is going to use human flesh as a mask? I mean, that's so crazy. It's insane in every way possible. I mean, who would not become freaked out by that mask from the Texas Chainsaw series? But yeah, I had to give him number 1 just because of that, just because of how crazy that mask is. But yeah, that's my top 11 mask. I mean, y'all can hate it or love it, it doesn't really matter. But if you guys have your own list of masks, go ahead and write it down in the comments. It doesn't have to be a top 11. It could be a top 5. It could be just one mask that you think is very important to you. Either way, go ahead and leave your comments. And right now we are going to take another break. And when we come back, we are going into the outro.
Wendy, darling, light of my life, I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in.
Alright, you guys, so we are back. We are back here for the outro. As you guys always know, I always have a meme of the week for you guys, and I always have a movie of the week for you guys. So for the movie of the week, I want to start off with is Cannibal Holocaust. I know I've been talking about it all day today, but it's definitely worth a watch if you guys have Amazon Prime. Definitely check it out. I mean, it is definitely an eye-opening movie if you guys are not the easily squeamish. I mean, I would say, like, if you are definitely a gore fan, this is definitely a movie for you. I know I'm a gore fan. That's why my favorite movies are like Terrifier, Saw, Hostel, movies like that, Kill Bill. So yeah, definitely if you guys are like into gore, I would say like this is definitely the movie for you to watch. I mean, this movie definitely will shock you if you haven't seen it before. I know I I was kind of like in a stage of shock. And for the meme of the week is a meme of Curious George going into Crystal Lake. I actually thought this was really hilarious. I mean, there was a host of other memes I could have chose from, but this is the one I chose. But I chose this one for this week because I just thought it was very funny to see Curious George go into Camp Crystal Lake, and it's just like, wow. That Curious George is about to get a rude awakening. Oh man. But either way, that's our show for today. I will be back next week. I know I'm kind of late with this episode, but hey, I mean, it's been a busy week. If I'm not posting anything on Saturday, expect something on Sunday. If not Sunday, expect something on Monday. But other than that, it's your boy Walterdoom signing out. You guys can catch me on Instagram or on Twitter. Yeah, I finally created that Twitter account that I was mentioning to you guys, which is at Walterdoom1. And of course, Instagram is just at Walterdoom. But either way, I'm going ahead and signing out for another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. This your boy Walterdoom. This is America. Don't let them catch you slipping now. Peace.